The time is 1996, where two siblings go on an adventure they didn't expect when their father, a pilot who works on the remote frontier in Alaska, crashes somewhere in the Alaskan wilderness after a dangerous flight, leaving the siblings on their own, also having a sidekick of a stranded baby polar bear named Cubby. The two humans and the white cuddly baby bear now must face the dangers of nature as they attempt to find their father and avoid the two poachers that are after Cubby. This week on Back to the Balcony, we discuss the 1996 family adventure film, Alasksa.
Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert, two titans of cinematic review. Sometimes right, sometimes wrong, but always captivating. Your hosts Antonio of the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast and Justin Henson of the Movie Wire are here to take you back to the balcony.
You know, getting into some cold weather this time of year, I figured why not visit some cold movies, and I will leave that definition as you will. Now, I remember seeing this in theaters, and I remember liking it, and I was a teenager. I also remember the Siskel and Ebert review. And finally, I also remember this was the decade of family animated films, from Free Willy, Born to be Wild, Homeward Bound, Monkey Trouble, Air Bud, etc., etc. But this is where I think we're going to have this discussion where our standards are set is do we set our standards on this repetitive subgenre of animal family films, or do we like this movie or dislike this movie as just an overall film? And you know what? My rewatch as an adult decades later, I'm not a fan. I am not a fan, but I'm not going to get ahead of myself because I know this was a first time watch for you, and I am curious on your thoughts on this film, and then we'll get into it.
You blew my mind. I'd never heard of this movie. So I would have been 15 when this came out, never heard of this film. Not even like in my video store days that I feel like I saw this on the shelf. This was completely new to me. So I was excited about that part. Here's the thing. Okay, not a fan of the movie, but not for like the reasons that I think Gene isn't a fan of the movie when we get into it. If there's one thing I put it in my Letterboxd review, is it possible for an adventure film to have too much adventure? I think that's the movie's problem. It's not like The River Wild where they build tension in between the scenes of excitement and adventure on the river. This movie is like 90% them in some kind of danger. Whether it's the rapids, whether it's the snow and the avalanche and the hunters, and then 45 minutes of dangling from a cliffside above a plane, like it's nothing but children screaming in peril. And I can get how that would be exciting for some kids, but I think the biggest crime of this movie is that it's set in Alaska and it's got this cuddly, cute polar bear cub. And they barely use the polar bear cub. It's so little of the movie, yet it's so much of the marketing. 90% of this movie is these two kids yelling at each other or hanging off a cliffside. It's just too much adventure. What do we need more of? We needed more polar bear. We needed a lot more Charlton Heston and his little mustache and his cute little accent. And I think we needed a little bit more of what Gene says later. We needed some more tension of finding dad, because there is a lot of just sibling rivalry in this movie. That's what I didn't like about it. But I opened my arms to this movie because it does fit the narrative of the things that you were saying. Things like Cheetah and A Far Off Place, all those 90s kids in the wilderness movies. Far From Home, Adventures of Yellow Dog. Like, I loved all those. I was hoping to have a little bit of nostalgia bait with this movie, even though I had never seen it, but I wanted it to feel like those movies, and it kind of doesn't. And I think that's its biggest sin, is it doesn't feel like those movies that we are so familiar with, and maybe that's why I feel like it's kind of fallen off the radar of kid, animal, wilderness adventure films of the 90s.
I think you nailed it to an extent, but I think the main problem with this is it has too many ideas. It has too many directions it's trying to go. It's trying to have the poachers, it has the polar bear, you have the stakes of the kids traveling alone in the wilderness. Pick a direction. We don't need the poachers at this point because they're in it very minimal. And we don't even get a satisfying
No.
ending with these characters. So it's kind of just pointless. And I think it throws off the tone of the movie where we have this family adventure. And then I I watched it twice, one with my son who absolutely loved it. And I'll get into that in a second on what this movie's
Right.
targeting for, since I loved it when I was a teenager. But there's a moment where we have Mama Bear carcass being shoved on Baby Bear's face. And I think that is something that is a pivotal thought, that this shouldn't have poachers in it. Have something else, because it's almost pointless having this. To your point, we have 90% of the movie of the kids in peril, going from adventure, situational stake after another. And there's really no point. And we don't get enough bear. We get cute, cuddly, situational pieces of him, of the bear just holding a rope, pulling up a father, following down river. It's all situational, of just this
It's a
bear put
prop.
in
Yeah, he's a
cute
prop.
spots. It's merely a prop. So I think this would have followed a direction of Far From Home, where we just had the kids and the bear facing situations. Because even when we take our older brother here, where we never get a connection with him and the bear, and even at the end, it's not satisfying. None of the chemistry between the bear and the kids are satisfying here because it doesn't feel earned. It is merely a prop to say, we had this idea of the Alaskan wilderness, and it doesn't take a lot, especially with the cinematography, to make Alaska look beautiful. Alaska looks beautiful in any shot, but do something with these characters and the environment, and it just doesn't pan out. But at the same time, when we have kids engulfed in this movie, they're engulfed in a new environment, a new cute, cuddly character. That's the entertainment value where I think this movie was really going for. And I think that's what I had the appeal to it when I was, 13, 14 years old, where it was taking me to this environment. But at the same time, as an adult, we've seen Alaska time and time again in film and documentaries or even visiting. So by the time we mature, we've seen it before. Kids haven't. And I think this does a great job on the simplistic level to give kids that natural eye candy that most family movies don't have today. So I will give the movie a little bit of credit on
Yeah, I'll
that.
give it a little bit of credit. And here's the thing: it's like the performances, Thora Birch and Vincent Kartheiser from Mad Men. Like I knew him from Masterminds, and then I knew him from Mad Men. I didn't realize he did another film, which was this one. And I think it's really interesting to see him as this younger character. They're not bad actors. It's just bad characters. These are poorly written characters, poorly written dialogue. So even when they're doing their best to have this banter between them, it doesn't feel real because the dialogue sucks. It's just not a good. They're not good characters. The dad, Dick Benedict, face from the A Team, I thought that was great. He feels like such a afterthought of this movie. Like they cut back to him just enough to show, oh, he's almost dead. He needs to get rescued soon. But they don't really spend enough time with him or show enough of his journey to even really care about it until we get to the end and they try to rescue him. And then we have that heroic moment where Cubby comes along and pulls the rope like that. I liked that. That was cool. But yeah, I think your original point of like, there's too many ideas or there's not enough. The idea is it's Alaska. We want to show Alaska, and we don't show how perilous it really is, right? Like the rapids, okay, there's peril there, but at the same time, not once do I feel like they realize how dangerous it is, because every time something bad happens to these kids, they just walk it off and on to the next, right? They don't have any time to recoup or recover. There's stupid dialogue after each and every instance of adventure and danger, and then they just walk off on to the next one. And that was like a problem for me. At least in the movies that we were talking about before, all the actions have true consequences. And I feel like there weren't any real consequences from this. And that's why I said, okay, you don't like the poachers. I like the poachers, but they're not mean enough. They're not bad enough. They're just kind of like there to have one extra element of danger and it never feels dangerous, right? Like Charlton Heston should have been the George C. Scott character from Rescuers Down Under in this, right? He should have been a badass with zero empathy, sympathy, or care about any living creature, human or non-human. But instead, he's kind of like this storybook caricature of what a hunter is. And I'm like, what a waste. What a waste of talent. Now, it is a Nepo hire because his son, Fraser Heston, directed the movie. So that's how he got Charlton into the movie. I was really surprised to see him in this. Had no idea this was on his resume, but now I understand why. But yeah, like I feel the biggest missed opportunity is the danger's not danger enough, the villains aren't villainous enough, and not enough polar bear. We need more polar bear.
We need more polar bear. Well, you brought up a good point. Is the situations don't feel dangerous enough because let's take even the rapid scene. They're smiling and laughing going down. I would be shitting my pants going down this river, especially when we have Sean, who is obviously not as in tune with nature as Jesse is, who you can tell this is his first time on a river and he's smiling and laughing in danger. So the stakes, the character direction here isn't spot on. But at the same time, this isn't a performance issue. This is a behind the scenes issue. This is a direction, editing problem, because even when we have those rapid, the editor doesn't pay attention to what we're actually doing here. I want to go back to the first time we see problematic issues with this film is when they're going down the snow slope for the first time and Jessie has her boots on and the other one has sneakers on, and it looks almost like a slight hill where there's no danger. And then we have edits that change the depth of the hill. When he's sliding down, we see like moments of bumps coming down. The editing ruins the stakes. And I think this is where, at a simplistic level, kids will enjoy it because they don't notice those things. But as I'm rewatching, I had to rewind it a couple times, is the hill literally changes height every single time we get a different transition shot. And it drove me nuts. And we get that with the rapid scene. We pick and choose what looks dangerous and what doesn't, even though it doesn't make sense. So that's what ruins the stakes and I think holds it back from being enjoyable as an adult when we feel the danger element. So when it comes to how the kids are reacting, the editing, those are the two biggest problems with this movie. Is we don't feel the stakes because the characters don't feel the stakes. And even our damn editor doesn't feel the stakes because he is just copying and pasting different rapid moments to combine a scene. So we don't feel that danger. So the performances, I think, are fine here. Cubby does a fantastic job. But I think the editing just pulls this movie back. And we have to look at the talent here. Most of the behind the scenes, we don't have a huge resume. For some, this is their first, second, third movie, whatever it may be. So they don't have the experience to really tell the story of danger in the Alaskan wilderness. They don't have the talent to say, let's take this beautiful scenery, the danger element that's behind this beauty, and display it so an entire family can enjoy it, not just 5-year-olds.
Yeah, the continuity, I'm glad that you mentioned that in the editing because it's a problem. Now, here's the thing, is like the film looks beautiful, the cinematography is great, and there is a lot of, let's say, set matching to environment matching, especially at the end when they're rescuing the dad from the plane. It reminded me of Cliffhanger, right? Where it's like you could tell that there was some really great matte painted shots and then contrasted with the actual shots of the wilderness. It worked pretty well. However, that rapid scene is bullshit. Like every time it cuts to them, you see the shoreline right behind them and it's still water. Then you cut to the opposite angle and it's raging rapids. And then you see them acting scared, but the water is still and the shoreline's right behind. So you can tell that it's an obvious matching, let's say the B unit, second unit footage of the rapids to the main shots of the kids. And they do that a lot. They do that with the snow hills. They do that with the tumbling down the hill when they're chasing the polar bear, and they do that with the rapid scenes. Like, it was obvious, and I'm usually pretty forgiving of that, but come on, like that was pretty bad. I'll give you that much. You know, here's the biggest problem for me with this movie is that I don't know what the passion is behind it, because it feels like a kid's movie. It feels like the director is trying to jump on that bandwagon, but I also feel like there's no passion for the wilderness or the environmental message, right? Like I said, the poaching is just a springboard to bring those characters in and have some danger for the polar bear. But at the same time, I never felt like we were getting some kind of we should, stop poaching or stop this environmental destruction of the wildlife in Alaska. Like, there's no message to this movie. It is pure adventure, and that's okay. But when you make it a movie this big with this much environment in it, it kind of feels weird that you don't know what the focal point is of it. Like, there's really no motivation behind any of these people of why they're there, what they're doing, until the dad gets put in danger. And then it's all about rescuing him. But that's the least interesting part about this movie. What are we doing with all the rest of this? Like, there's no heart behind the film. We're at least in those films, like Far From Home, even The Incredible Journey, there is at least this idea of like, what have we lost in our attachment to nature? What have we lost as humans as we're building cities and destroying the world? There's none of that in there. There's nothing but, like I said, too much adventure and not enough heart.
Well, you look at the first act where we have hints of culture, community, and how the community reacts to the environment. We have little snippets of where this movie could have gone, and we don't get, and they do nothing with it. And that is the pride of Alaska. Come on. Give us something of culture. Give us something of depth. Give us something to hold on to really appreciate this beautiful country, this nature. This is something that should have been more addressed, but instead we get antagonists that don't go far enough. They're kind of linear. You have Coots, who's like wants to be goofy, but you can tell he's intimidated in his acting style
Heston,
next
yeah.
to
When you share scenes with Heston, yeah.
where he doesn't want to be goofy. I mean, you can tell there's an intimidation there, and it's almost like they wanted to have that goofy sidekick next to Heston, and it never really fully goes there. And they wander off in the sunset like it's trying to have an Alaska 2 sequel that nobody cares. So we wanted, when you start off a movie with poachers that have the stakes of waving a dead polar bear in front of a cub, you want justice for these evil people. And when they just walk free with no consequence, that's bullshit. And it should have been something where there has to be a consequence to this, especially when we're talking about culture, the environment, nature. Poachers, we want to see a really hard consequence. That helicopter should have went down. It should have like blown up. It should have done something. Not them wandering with just an injury on the kneecap from Heston.
Rescuers Down Under had no qualms about taking out that George C. Scott character in the most violent way in an animated movie, and this doesn't even come close to that. And like talking about the culture, there are two indigenous characters that I feel maybe got left on the cutting room floor. You've got Ben and Charlie. And there is a scene where they're talking about like, okay, we need to let the kids go on the rest of their vision journey, right? Their vision journey is to rescue their dad. We shouldn't interfere with this. It's like the one thing with the old ways. The problem is that scene means nothing because we've been given no context of to what these guys really are. They're there at the beginning, they coach the kids a little bit, and they show up in the middle when they find them. And here's the thing. Are these kids really in danger? Because every 5 minutes they're bumping into poachers, they're bumping into Charlie and Ben. Like, they're never in that much danger until they are. That's a problem. Like, they're not isolated to the point where like, oh, one wrong turn. And also, they never look cold. Like, they never look cold. I don't know what the deal is with the movie. Anyway, I feel like I'm just kind of kicking a dead horse. But like I said, did I hate the movie? No, I didn't hate the movie. It just left me wanting more, like the other films that we talked about delivered. Is it a bad movie? It's hard to say because there's so much good in it. I can't say that it's a bad or lazy movie, but it's definitely misguided. And I didn't really look too much into the director's film history and filmography, but it definitely feels like someone gave this guy some money and he went and made a movie and got his dad in it. That's what it feels like to me. And there's lots of talent in it, and they all do well. But again, like I said, I don't think they really know what to do because I don't think they're being directed that well.
Well, it's an innocent enough movie. And I think that's where it's hard to kick this movie down because you can see the intent of what it wants to do. And again, this, I don't even think it's a full, we've said it before. The director is at the helm. It's all hands on deck when it comes to how it falters. But at the same time, this is a filmmaking problem. It's not a performance problem. And I don't even know if I want to blame the dialogue to it because it follows the same tropes as we see any other family animal movie. It has the same formula. So it's hard to blame the writing on it. Now, the storytelling and the writing, sure, I think, to my opinion, like I said, I think it is. And like you said, it is a little bit misguided. It does have not a focused idea what it wants to do. But I think at the same time, every other element going into it, from the cinematography, that is good. But like I said, it doesn't take a lot to make this movie look good. Alaska's beautiful. The editing's horrible. So I think this is, like you said, a misguided movie. It really is something that if you're going past 12, 13, it's going to be hard to find something good with it, but you can appreciate what it's trying to do. I don't even think it's a bad movie. I just think if you had good, talented filmmakers behind the curtain, they could have done something with this. They could have guided these characters into something. They could have guided the story into something. But I think this is a prime example of hiring the right people to do the right job. And I think we just don't get that with this. Even the action scenes, this could have been something of entertainment, but at almost a 2-hour runtime, we don't have anything that's really accomplished here.
Well, and I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I feel like this movie could use some fucking cliche. Like we talked about it in Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken. We've talked about it in other movies where it's like, oh, that cliche moment where the animal's going to die or the animal mom dies and they really have that extended scene and there's a false tears or, oh no, Shadow's not coming back, right? This movie has none of that. Like there's peril, but at the same time, none of that peril makes me feel like if if Sean goes over the cliff, I don't give a shit, right? Like I really felt that way. I did not feel attached to anybody. And as cute as Cubby is, they don't give us any heartstring moments with Cubby. That's why we needed more bear. We needed the bear to almost die. We needed the bear to like be trapped and attacked by wolves. I don't know. But this movie needed more cliche, less adventure, more cliche, and let's talk. I think that was what the problem was, is that they were too afraid to be stereotypical. So instead, they're just going to give us perilous moment after perilous moment after perilous moment, and it's exhausting. It's like when we talked about some of the John Wick movies, where it's like, I can only take so much gun ballet before I get a scene of exposition, right? That's how I feel about this movie. I can only take so much children in peril, whether it's in rapids or cliffs or avalanches or rolling down hills, without some real exposition and character development in the middle. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it at that.
Well, you won't have another episode where we're hoping a polar bear to be attacked by wolves or a baby polar bear to die. But I think you're 100% right. Is we have to have some danger. There's some poachers that never really get to engage with the bear in the entirety of the movie. So I think there has to be stakes. I mean, if it was Disney, they probably would have found another lost teenage girl in the woods for Sean to fall in love with. But you know what? I would have been fine with that, even though I'm going to contradict myself and Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken. But I think there has to be more stakes than just situation after situation. We have to have that emotional pull because even when we get to the final moment, and this is where my pure disappointment just unraveled, is Sean is saying goodbye to this bear who doesn't even touch the bear, feeds him a pie. The edit cuts away, and a quarter of a second later goes back, and he is just bawling. Nobody can generate that many tears in a quarter of a second. And he just walks away without engaging the bear. So this is something that's so simplistic and stupid that at least have an honorable goodbye where we want Sean to engage with this bear, because the entirety of the movie, he never really does other than drop insults to the bear or just stare at the bear. So this is where the miss is we, if at worst case scenario, don't have those cliches, but at least have the conflict of Sean not attaching himself to this bear, then have the redemption at the end that, thank you, You saved my dad. Like, I'm not going to touch you. Come on.
Okay, well, let's hear what our critics have to say about this. Roger brought this to the show.
Their dad is a bush pilot in Alaska, and after his plane is lost in a storm and search parties can't find him, his son and daughter go on an odyssey of their own in the new movie Alaska, which is in the old tradition of real-life nature adventures, but which I found surprisingly entertaining. In the movie, 13-year-old Thora Birch and Vincent Kartheiser as her 15-year-old brother are up against dangerous odds as they make their way into the Alaskan wilderness. They're befriended along the way by a polar bear cub that becomes their guide and inspiration. But the villains in the movie, poachers played by Charlton Heston and Duncan Fraser, are also following the little bear. Alaska belongs to a genre I guess you could call kids on a quest in the wilderness, and I hope it doesn't inspire its young audiences to try to make friends with the bears at Yellowstone next summer. But the movie is beautifully photographed and acted in a convincing, straightforward way by the young stars, and on its own level, I enjoyed it. I imagine it's targeted at kids up to about 13, and I think a lot of them are going to love it.
I was super surprised by this. Just because I've seen him tear apart films before, but he is generally the one that's a little bit more lenient on kid adventure, action, nature movies, right? He's the one that's a little bit more understanding, and as it's going to come up in this conversation, he does not only view child films, kid films, from a kid's perspective because he's so fascinated of how those movies made him feel when he was a kid, but he tries to give them the benefit of the doubt of who the audience is. And we've had that debate back and forth many, many times. And that's what he's doing with this, I feel. But the argument gets deeper, but on first reflection, I don't know if he and I saw the same movie.
And here's why I originally brought this movie to the table. It's not because of the quality of the movie, it's because of the discussion. Because I can't fault Roger, because at this point, we've kind of gotten to know Roger on his nostalgic feels of, we know he has a soft spot for this, but it's usually with a bigger piece with animals. And like we talked about before, we don't get that here, but he was more targeted to the adventure feel. And that's where I have a big problem with it, because again, I'll go on, carry the torch saying the cinematography here is not good, because it could have been a lot more with it. I mean, we have a cinematographer, Tony Westman, who is one of his early projects. Like I said, it doesn't take a lot to make this movie look good if it's shot in Alaska. It's what you do with it. Where the real issue is going to be when you have the intimate moments, the campfire that looks almost artificial, the up close shots, or the up close shots of the polar bear with the northern lights in the background. It looks artificial. So the holistic feel of the movie, I can't say it's great cinematography. And that's where I think Roger really puts the blinder on to just getting engulfed in this story. But I do agree with him when it comes to what the target audience is going to be, because I've seen it in my household. They're engulfed in this.
Yeah, and it's hard for me to even think like if I would be when I was this age. I think I liked cuter movies of this type, or the more perilous when the animals were involved. But at the same time, it's like, I don't care about these dipshit kids. Like, they don't. Like, they're good actors. Maybe they just have bad chemistry, or maybe, like I said, they're just bad characters, poorly written. But I never feel like an attachment to them where I don't want them to die. Unlike Keith Coogan and Cheetah. Like, oh, God, like, he loves that cheetah. Don't kill him. Reese Witherspoon in A Far Off Place, right? Like, all these characters, you really care about the stakes. And it's bigger stakes than just their dad. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe it's just like, oh, this is just a family thing. And yeah, we don't want dad to die. He's single dad. What are they going to do? Explain that to me in the dialogue. Explain that to me with the characters. Don't just put them in perilous situations and expect me to care if something happens, because I don't. And that's like just a bad jumping off point for a movie like this. I really feel like he was taken more by the spectacle than he was the actual storytelling. And Gene jumps on his case for this too. But yeah, it's just, it's a really interesting thing. I was not expecting his favorable response. In fact, I was like, ooh, what's he going to say? He's going to get him. And he doesn't.
Well, it's one of those cynical things I think that we get into where we, I hate bringing this movie up, but Thora Birch her first movie was Purple People Eater, and that movie, now if I looked upon it with eyes, and I've watched it on YouTube now, and it's absolutely horrible. It's just nothing goes right in that movie, but there's still a nostalgic factor that I can't hate it because it's so simplistic and it really does open up the simplistic stakes. And I think that's where they're going to get into it in a minute. I don't want to get ahead of it, but this is where I think when we look at a movie, we can't just look at our own selfish kind of eyes on it of, is it good filmmaking? Kids aren't going to care. It's going to be, can they follow along with it? Can they understand it? And more importantly, was this movie meant for us or for them? And I think that's where we're going to get into a deeper discussion here in the next clips.
Yeah. So here we go. Gene has a very different opinion than Roger.
First of all, Roger, I think this, you know how you always say to me, you missed the boat on this one when we came far? You missed the harbor. This is, I think, one of the most laughably bad pictures I've seen in a long time.
Incredible. How can you say that?
I'll say how. The father is in a plane wreck.
Yeah.
He's far away. Now, the whole story develops with them and the bear cub and all that. You know that the word father, I clocked this, the word father, and this is the movie, not other research, the word father is never mentioned for 40 minutes in this picture.
So what?
They're not talking or acting remotely like kids who's lost their father and trying to find their mother.
Your criticism of this movie is utterly irrelevant to the experience of the film on the screen and would be meaningless to anyone seeing the film.
Why? You mean you wouldn't be, it wasn't meaningless to me. I saw it.
You're imagining a totally different picture that should have done something else.
No.
I like it. I tell you what, Gene is speaking my language. I never saw this movie before. I have zero emotional attachment, nostalgia attachment to it. And like I said, my biggest problem with the movie is like these kids don't seem to care enough about the fact that their dad's gone. Like, I get it. They're trying to get from A to B, but all these perilous situations, they literally walk off from almost dying, have a few little jokes, run into a polar bear, have some fun time, right? Like, that's the biggest part. There is never a blanket of ominous tension over this movie. They never feel like they have a time frame or a timetable that dad's going to be dead without food or water and he's going to die from exposure in 2 days. They never feel that way. They never talk about him. They're talking about all these other things, and that's the problem. Gene is 100% right. There is no tension in the exposition in the movie. Instead, it's these little tricks they play to introduce a bear, these poachers, the indigenous guys, but never the ominous tension of, I gotta rescue my father, because I feel like the director or the screenwriter didn't want to bog us down with emotion. Like, oh, we want to have fun in the wilderness. Okay, it's like, but dad's fucking dying, right? So
I think you were a lot more articulate when it comes to the why than Gene was, because I don't care if the characters say the word father during his time, but I think the more proper way of saying it is we don't have the reminder of endangerment. We get one glimpse, I think, in the movie where he's hanging from the plane where it goes down a couple levels.
When it starts sliding down, yeah.
We should have seen that throughout the movie, to see a timetable, to see the stakes, to see the danger, instead of going into an adventure movie and focusing with Gene saying they don't mention the word father. This should have been a little bit more specific on, this is an adventure movie. Instead of dialogue, maybe we should have gotten more cutscenes of the actual stakes, of the danger. That would have actually made the pacing issues disappear, because we don't know when
100%.
We don't know when the dad is gonna go down the hill. It's almost like different levels that we should have gotten. So
we needed, essentially, it's like an hourglass situation, right? When you flip it and you've got so much time, we needed the plane to be like attached to a branch that's slowly breaking and just keep cutting to that, right? Something. Give us something that builds the tension, that we have a time frame of when this dude is either going to die of exposure. I mean, okay, let's say he has a canteen and he drops it. Oh no, how long can he last without water, right? He's got a K-ration pack or something. He has a flare gun. He drops it. There needs to be some kind of tension to show that the clock is running out. And there never is. That's the problem. So when he says that they don't mention the word father, yeah, you're right. He's not articulating it the way we are, but I get what he's saying. Where's the danger? Where is this? We got to get this moving. And if your movie's going to be 2 hours, give us 2 hours of that and it'll make it go by faster. I don't need 20 minutes of us chasing the bear through the snow because he's fun. It's like, Dad's dying.
But that's the thing. Cubby is fun, but that's like we said before, it's the element of the idea. It's a prop. He slides down a hill, he pulls a rope, he follows down, which God knows why he's doing this, because I don't know any wild animal that will take an attachment to humans that they've never seen before. They don't even explain that, and I would have loved to hear that in these reviews.
I would not be opening a fucking cage if I knew my dad was dying and taking the time to create some kind of recognition and attachment to a wild animal. I wouldn't. Dad's dying, right?
It's like, would they do the same if it was a wolf? This is a fucking bear. It's like, even on two legs, it's still almost the same height as the little one. Why would you? I don't know. It's one of those, I don't know. Sure.
Exactly. Now, okay, how about this? It would be a different story if it was one kid, right? If it was one kid, if it was a far from home yellow dog situation or a cheetah situation, it's one kid. That makes a lot more sense. This doesn't, because there's two of them and they are trying to build like this camaraderie between the two that takes away from the danger or the, like I said, the hourglass situation if it's just one kid not having to deal with another. Anyway, they go back at it.
Plane is plainly visible where it's wrecked. And there passes by.
It obviously isn't plainly visible to the search plane. That's why it didn't find it.
It's plainly visible to the search plane. That would be a normal search plane.
Wait a minute. You didn't give your sympathy to this movie.
Roger, I'm not nitpicking on a major story, and the acting,
well, I'm sure
the acting by Charlton hasn't
a lot of 10-year-old kids are going to be saying, "Gee, they didn't."
And now, Roger, you focused on my third point, and that's this: you seem to be reviewing this picture, and I've seen it other times, of what kids will think. And I want to remind you of something.
I enjoyed it too, Gene, and I enjoyed Charlton Heston, to get ahead of you here.
Yeah.
I thought that stuff was kind of funny in a satiric way. Okay. He's playing against time.
I just want you to say that you really enjoyed it yourself.
I did enjoy this movie. I enjoyed this movie.
Okay.
Oh, boy. I mean, they've had this argument before about other movies. They had this argument with Benji the Hunted. But I really have to give Gene a lot of credit here because he stays completely composed during this conversation because he knows that Roger's going to defend it, and Roger is the one that gets really heated and defensive, not about the movie, but about how he feels about the movie. It becomes like a personal attack and a personal reaction, and I feel that Gene baited him into it. He knew how to make this an entertaining piece of television, because he knows that if he got all heated and Roger got all heated, people are always going to side with Roger. But if you keep your composure and make Roger look like the one who's being completely out of whack about his opinion and this movie, because it's a shit movie, otherwise it would be on everyone's tongue. Everyone would be talking about how great Alaska was when they were a kid. I never heard of it. He knew what he was doing. That's some sneaky pull, and I respect it.
You know, knowing Roger, he knows the quality of this movie. He really does. And one thing I've noticed about him is when he goes on the defense, it's one of those, he's defending it for a specific audience, even though he deep down knows this isn't good filmmaking. This isn't a good adult movie. But the one pet peeve I've always had with, especially with these two, and especially more specifically Gene, is when you're going into criticism saying you cannot say other people will like it. You can't say, and to an extent, adults, fine. But there's no way you can justify a family movie, an animated movie, a kid's movie, and not say kids will like it. That shouldn't be a no-no when it comes to critiquing a movie. It shouldn't be something that's taboo, saying, in your critique, kids will like it. Because guess what? Especially when it comes to this movie, I liked it. My kids liked it. And I'm sure a lot of kids liked it. But adults, I can see where it diminished because adults hold the key to making the success of this movie, of buying it on home video, of renting it. And adults didn't see the appeal to it. So I think kids did like this movie. And when it comes to cinema and films, even as bad as some kids' movies are, there has to be a critique out there to defend the watchability for kids. So it drives me nuts when that is even involved in conversation, saying you can't put that in. It should be how I feel. Guess what? I feel kids will like this movie. And Roger should have articulated it that way. Is that what these two are huge on, is doing criticism of I feel. And this one, Roger did get frustrated because deep down, I wholeheartedly believe this isn't a great movie. All he had to say was, I feel kids would like this movie, and put it to an end.
Correct. And the thing that this movie lacks, and is a thing that Roger can't defend, but it's why I was on Team Roger in the Cop and a Half conversation, is because the movies that he tends to defend for kids that Gene usually shits on, they're fun. There's fun elements, there's humor, there's weirdness, there's wacky characters, there's henchmen that are getting kicked in the balls, right? Like, there's stuff that is fun. There's no fun in this movie, and that's the thing that I really told myself at the end of the movie. It's like, the peril that they put these kids in, fine, whatever. There's so much of it, they forgot to have fun. 20 seconds of chasing the polar bear down the hill and laughing with them is all the fun you're really going to get. You're not going to win me over. As a kid, I wouldn't have liked this movie because where's the fun? Goonies is fun. It's dangerous and it's fun, right? There are so many films like that. Cop and a Half, dangerous and fun. Monster Squad, dangerous and fun. They even remember to have fun in the Incredible Journey movies. These are talking dogs and cats, yet they joke with each other. There's fun. There's nuance to that. This lacks it. This lacks any fun. So that's where it's like, I can't get behind Roger on his defense of it, because if I'm going to have a movie for a kid that I'm going to watch as an adult, there has to be a fun factor.
Well, and that's where I'm going to disagree, because it doesn't always have to be fun just because it's kids. You have to have a set of standards. As a kid, take the kids to a new environment, give them an emotional stake to it, or have some fun, or give them something new to see. Teach a moral lesson. We, as kids, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, Old Yeller in the classroom. Old Yeller wasn't fun. That was traumatizing. So I wasn't standing up and cheering for Old Yeller, but it did make me unlock an emotion. So we go to Milo and Otis. That wasn't necessarily fun, but it did take us on a journey to see new things. I think this is where the misguide was it couldn't decide what it wanted to be, but it did take us on a new environment for kids to see, like I said earlier, eye candy, to take on a journey, even though all the elements don't pull together, but it does do that element. And if as kids grow up, they're going to forget this movie. I will state that it's going to be lost in memory, but in the moment, they are on a journey of the environment. And that's where I will give Roger a little bit of credit for. It doesn't always have to be goofy fun, which Roger does really push. And we've seen a lot of those reviews, but it does have to do something. So out of my criteria, does it take you on some sort of journey? Yes, but that's about it.
I think that our definition of fun is totally different. Like, the danger scenes should have an element of fun to it, right? But there's not. Like, it's just too much. It's too much of show and tell, right? Like, we're showing all the things that are happening, but we're not telling you why. We're not telling you what the characters are coming out of that emotionally. I mean, these kids should be scarred as fuck, and they just, all right, back to the world now, Dad. You know, like, it's almost like they walked off the whole movie, like they walked out of the rapids or they walked off of the snow hill, right? Anyway. Okay, so how do I grade these critiques? So with Gene, I mean, I really agree with him. And I really love the way he tactfully kind of egged on Roger and knew what was coming. Like, he was very calculated, not only in his critique, but how he was going to incite conversation with his fellow critic. Is it an A review? No, I don't think so. But I'm going to give him a solid B because I agree with his opinion of the movie, but I really, really enjoyed the way that he interacted with Roger, kind of egged him on, and maintained his composure. There was a lot of control here, and he's the one that usually gets a little bit emotional or flabbergasted in a review, especially if something that Roger likes. This one, I think he checkmated him really early on, and he knew it, and I loved that energy that it brought to this conversation.
This one is probably the hardest Roger review because wholeheartedly we can see what he wants to portray, the message that he wants to give about this movie. But once he gets rattled, it's hard for him to be articulate on who this movie was made for. And he's
tripping over himself.
He is. And even though he does state it that 13-year-olds will like this, under 13 will like this, which I do agree with, and I will hold the torch on that one. But I think he gets tripped and he doesn't know how to articulate the flaws with this movie. He is so concerned with defending his position of the likability and even how he's presented his last line saying, I did like it. It's too defensive where it's not believable because it just sounds like a deflection of his opinion. But we know what he does mean is that this movie isn't a well-made movie, but kids will like it. It should be that simplistic. So I was a little disappointed in the outcome of his review, but I liked where he was going. So I'm not going to rate it based on the outcome, but I am going to give it a near miss at 2.5 stars.
Okay. I like that. What I will say is that my 4-year-old daughter watched this with me, and she essentially left the theater room every time the bear went away. She just wanted more bear. So I'm like, you know what? I'll put you on the show. Needs more bear is what she would have said. Anyway, all right, cool. Well, now I can say that I've seen Alaska, and it wasn't for me. All right, so next week, we are going to do one of our special episodes. We are going to do an episode based on the appearance of Siskel and Ebert on a very short-lived Nickelodeon kids movie review show called Rated K for Kids. This is a series that ran between 1986 and 1989. It was roughly 4 seasons, and I remember watching this every episode. It was something I desperately wanted to watch. It was always on Saturdays, and Siskel and Ebert made an appearance on this show where they reviewed some movies with these kids. They had like some open dialogue, and it was kind of cool seeing these kids that, sure, it was scripted, but there's a few kids that actually could hold their own against Siskel and Ebert. So we're going to kind of do like a retrospective episode based on this one appearance of Siskel and Ebert on Rated K for Kids. For you Nickelodeon nostalgia heads, I hope you tune into that one because to me, like, that was the era of Nick before it got into Ren and Stimpy and Doug and stuff like that, where they were very experimental of what they were doing, right? When they were bringing like a lot of the cool kids game shows like Double Dare and Family Double Dare and Nick Arcade, having a kids review show for movies that went on for 4 seasons. It was like 140 episodes. That's impressive, and nobody talks about it. So I'm glad that we're going to have a chance to go back and review that episode.
Well, I must have missed the boat on this one because you brought it to my attention, and I cannot wait to revisit this because I think it's going to be a great conversation. I think it's going to be a great revisit and just nostalgic.
I mean, like, I was one of those kids where it was like, I could totally be a Zoom kid, right? I could be totally one of those kids. And I was like, I could totally be on that show. Someone fly me to New York. I want to be on Rated K for Kids. So that's what I'm excited to revisit and see like, oh, I wonder if I could have held my own at 8 years old on that show.
My vote was for being on Nick Arcade. That was my dream.
Or Secrets of the Hidden Temple, right? Or Legends of the Hidden Temple. Legends of the Hidden Temple. Thank you for watching and listening. Please go rate, review, subscribe to our show on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. And please go and rate, review, subscribe to our show on YouTube. Leave some comments, leave a review, share it. We are really excited about some of our last episodes gaining traction in the new year. I'm really excited to see that the episode on Better Off Dead did really, really well. So I'm excited about that. And we'll see what season 3 brings now. So anyway, you can follow me, Antonio, over at the Cult Worthy Podcast on thecultworthy.com. You can follow my friend Justin Henson over at
themoviewire.com.
And we'll see you next week.
See you next week.